Imagine becoming successful beyond imagination, but never escaping the fear you grew up with. What if fame, success, and millions of fans still couldn't heal the child inside you? Some children grow up with love. Others grow up with fear disguised as discipline and learning how to stay quiet, how to avoid anger, how to hide emotions, how to survive emotionally inside their own home. And the saddest part? Many of them don't realize how deeply childhood affects them until they become adults. Because trauma doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes trauma looks like constantly apologizing, fear of failure, low self-worth, people-pleasing, emotional anxiety, feeling like you're never enough, and sometimes the people who are supposed to protect you emotionally become the reason you spend your entire adult life trying to heal. What happens to a child who is constantly criticized, constantly pressured to be perfect, constantly afraid of making mistakes? This video is not just about one person's story. It's about every child who grew up feeling like they had to earn love through achievement. Every person who still hears their parents' voice inside their head years later, and every adult silently carrying childhood wounds nobody else can see. Some of the most talented people in the world carried invisible emotional wounds from childhood. People admired their success without understanding the pain behind it. And in this video, we're going to talk about what happens psychologically when someone grows up with a harsh or emotionally damaging father, how childhood emotional trauma shapes personality, why many children of toxic parents become emotionally exhausted adults, how fear-based parenting destroys confidence, and most importantly, how to heal if you grew up that kind of environment. Sometimes the world sees fame, talent, and success. But behind all of that, there can still be a deeply wounded child. One of the most famous examples of this is Michael Jackson. Millions of people saw him as a legend, a superstar, a once-in-a-generation artist. But behind the success, there were years of emotional pain that started in childhood. Michael Jackson spoke multiple times about the fear and pressure he experienced growing up with his father. As a child, his life revolved around rehearsals, perfection, discipline, and constant criticism. He described being terrified of making mistakes, and according to many interviews over the years, he often connected childhood with fear instead of emotional safety. Imagine being a child whose value feels connected only to performance, only to success, only to perfection. Over time, that kind of pressure can deeply affect the way someone sees themselves. Many psychologists believe that children raised in emotionally harsh environments may grow up struggling with low self-worth, loneliness, emotional insecurity, difficulty trusting others, perfectionism, and a painful desire to reclaim the childhood they never truly had. And when people looked at Michael Jackson as an adult, many noticed something heartbreaking. Despite becoming one of the most famous people on earth, he still often seemed emotionally connected to the childhood he lost. Sometimes trauma doesn't disappear just because someone becomes successful. Fame cannot replace emotional safety. Money cannot heal childhood wounds by itself. And this is important to understand. A child can become incredibly talented while still carrying deep emotional scars internally. That's why emotional health matters so much, because children do not only need discipline, they also need warmth, safety, encouragement, affection, and the freedom to feel loved without constantly proving their worth. And maybe one of the saddest realities about childhood trauma is that many people spend adulthood trying to heal from environments they had no control over as children. A child should not feel afraid in their own home, but many children grow up constantly walking on eggshells around a parent, especially around fathers who use fear, humiliation, control, anger, or emotional neglect as parenting tools. Some fathers believe harshness creates strength, but often it creates emotional wounds instead. A child who grows up constantly criticized begins believing, "I'm not good enough." A child who grows up being emotionally ignored learns, "My feelings don't matter." And a child who grows up terrified of making mistakes becomes an adult who fears failure constantly. Fear may create obedience temporarily, but it destroys emotional security long term. And many people spend their entire adult life trying to heal from childhood environments that never truly felt safe. Now let's discuss how toxic fathers affect children psychologically. 1. Chronic anxiety. Children raised in emotionally unstable homes become hyper-aware of emotions. They constantly monitor moods, reactions, and tension. As adults, this often becomes overthinking, people-pleasing, anxiety, emotional exhaustion, because their nervous system never learned what safety feels like. 2. Perfectionism. Some children become obsessed with achievement because love only came through performance. Good grades, success, talent, obedience. They begin believing, if I succeed enough, maybe I'll finally be worthy. But no amount of achievement heals a child who only felt loved conditionally. 3. Low self-worth. Harsh parents often create adults who struggle to believe they deserve love. Even highly successful people can secretly feel broken inside because childhood criticism becomes an inner voice that never fully disappears. 4. Difficulty trusting others. When the people supposed to protect you emotionally become the source of fear, trust becomes complicated. Many adults raised this way struggle with relationships because vulnerability feels unsafe. Love feels dangerous. Not all toxic parents are evil. Sometimes they are deeply wounded people themselves. People raised without affection, without emotional intelligence, without healthy communication. Some parents repeat the pain they experienced because it's the only parenting style they know. But understanding someone's trauma does not erase the damage they caused. Pain explains behavior. It does not justify it. And many children spend years defending harmful parents while silently destroying themselves emotionally. So, if you grew up with a father, like this first, understand this. Your emotions are valid. You are not weak for being affected by childhood experiences. Children are deeply shaped by how they are treated emotionally. 1. Stop blaming yourself. Many children of harsh parents grow up believing, maybe I was too sensitive. Maybe I deserved it. Maybe I was a problem. But children are not responsible for managing adult emotional immaturity. 2. Understand that fear is not love. Respect built through fear is not emotional connection. Real love does not make a child terrified to exist naturally. 3. Learn emotional reparenting. Many adults eventually realize they must become the emotional safety they never received growing up. This means speaking kindly to yourself, allowing yourself to feel emotions without shame, learning boundaries, learning self-worth, learning emotional regulation. Healing often means giving yourself what your childhood never gave you. 4. Stop seeking validation from emotionally unavailable parents. One of the hardest truths to accept is that some parents may never become emotionally healthy enough to give the love you needed, and constantly chasing their approval can emotionally destroy you. Sometimes healing begins when you stop begging emotionally unavailable people to finally understand your pain. Now let's move to the most important part: how to deal with a toxic parent today. 1. Protect your mental health. Distance is not disrespect. Boundaries are not cruelty. You are allowed to protect your emotional peace. 2. Don't expect emotional maturity from emotionally immature people. Some parents refuse accountability forever, and accepting reality is painful, but necessary. 3. Build a healthy support system. Healing becomes easier when you are surrounded by emotionally safe people, friends, mentors, therapists. Healthy relationships. Support changes people. 4. Break the cycle. One of the most powerful things a person can do is refuse to pass their pain on to others. Healing is not just about surviving your childhood. It's about making sure the pain ends with you. Some children grow up carrying invisible scars nobody sees. They smile, achieve, work hard, make people laugh, while secretly fighting battles that started in childhood. And maybe one of the saddest things in the world is when a child spends their entire life trying to earn softness from someone who only knew how to be harsh. But healing is possible, not because the past disappears, but because you finally stop defining yourself by the way someone failed to love you properly. You are not broken because someone raised you through fear, and your worth was never supposed to depend on someone else's inability to love gently. If this video resonated with you, comment below "Healing starts with understanding," and subscribe for more videos about psychology, emotional healing, childhood trauma, self-worth, and becoming emotionally stronger.